Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to Head to Head, a Star Wars show. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars. Tonight, it looks like behind everybody's back, Dave Filoni ended up being promoted, very quietly, mind you, to executive creative director. So we're going to talk about how that's going to affect the franchise. Is it even a real title, or is it more ceremonial? Well, we're going to find out right now.
You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars. Begins now.
All right, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So, again, it seems like every single time we plan a show or we plan to do something different, some new piece of Star Wars news just pops up out of nowhere. And nothing came out of nowhere more than this bit of news that just hit us, last night?
Yep.
So what basically happened? Because I did not send this one to you. You sent this to me, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I remember I was working and, all of a sudden I get this text from you. I'm like, what? So yeah, fill us in.
Yeah, well, I'm always trying to, comb and try to stay ahead of the game as much as possible. So, we already had our show planned, actually, for tonight. We were going to talk about the Force users and, we were really gearing up for that. But then, this hit and I'm like, we cannot, just ignore this, because this is, too huge of a thing, because it's something we've been kind of, hoping for, talking about for a long time. And so now, this thing is here. So I just happened to be kind of looking at some Star Wars news, and then that was the first thing that popped up. And I'm like, first I had to check the source, because some of these sites, so then once I kind of verified the site, and then I started looking at other sites to kind of confirm things, I was just like, oh yeah, this is real.
Yep. Well, as usual, Ronaldo's joining us, and sure Joanna will be not too far behind, but yeah, I mean, it was really interesting because I had the exact same reaction you did when I first heard the news, or when you sent me the text. It wasn't like from "we got this covered" or something stupid like that. I mean, it seemed like it was legitimate, right? But I mean, first thing I did was I went in and I checked it out, and apparently what happened is some fan had been just perusing the Lucasfilm site and just noticed that this title was listed under Dave Filoni. So it actually comes directly from the Lucasfilm site. So the question becomes, when did this happen? Why did this happen? And how does this actually affect things? Now, I know some of this is going to be a little bit of speculation on our part, but, again, yeah, we were all set to do the top 10 most overpowered Force users or whatever, because we thought that might be a fun episode to do. But we had to table this, because when this thing came out, it's like, okay, this could, and we'll talk about that, but this could actually affect the franchise going forward. The fact is it, like I said, is this more of a ceremonial position? So what do you think, first of all?
Well, according to some of the reports and things like that, it was his new position was seen as one of many positions that are announced internally but not made public.
Right.
And it appears that the company was caught off guard by the enthusiastic response, to it. And, everybody was just kind of really happy about it. And so, I get it, that sometimes you have to kind of do in-field promotions, or you have to do it within house before you make, things public, especially in a company such as big as Disney and things like that. And, it's been a long time coming. I think he's definitely earned it. He's been super successful in, bringing us the Clone Wars, Rebels, and now Mandalorian is super successful. It's been winning all types of, not Bad Batch, it's been nominated for all these types of awards and things like that. I mean, he's just a phenomenal storyteller, and he really, truly has a passion for Star Wars. And the fact that he's only 46 years old, it gives, it's like, all right, now he's at the place where, he's definitely rooted and cemented in who he is and his craft. And now I think we have someone almost like a young George Lucas almost that could actually really move Star Wars to the next level.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. I hope that, first of all, I don't really see this as a ceremonial advancement, because
Mm-hmm.
I know sometimes when they do in-company promotions, it's almost like it's a title and it's somewhat meaningless. It's basically just something that they do in order to give people a name or whatever to responsibilities that they've taken on. But I think I agree with you in the sense of this almost feels like they're trying to create a title that George Lucas himself may have held had he not been basically the owner of the company, right? That this would be
Yeah.
really more the role that he would actually fill if he was an employee of the company.
Right. Yeah. I mean, George Lucas being the father of all this, I mean, it's called Lucasfilm, for Christ's sakes. I mean,
Right, right,
it's,
right.
so obviously, but yeah, I totally agree with you though. This is probably the title that he would have, if George Lucas was actually like an employee of his own company, this is probably the one he would have had. I mean, of course, he'd been executive producers and stuff like that, but
Sure, and he's been a director, but I mean, I like the
right.
fact that they call this executive creative director now. And anybody that's watching, Ronaldo, if you know this, you can chime in, of course. But I could have sworn this is why this whole thing came as somewhat of a shock to me, because I remember maybe it was a year ago. I think it was like around either right before The Rise of Skywalker came out or just after. And I seem to remember they appointed some woman in this position, because I remember that it was like a creative director or creative something. I remember that they were saying something like that, and they had
Mm-hmm.
named her, and she was specifically, if I'm not mistaken, appointed over the Star Wars franchise. And a lot of us were really mad because it wasn't Dave Filoni, but at the same time, we were a little bit relieved because it also wasn't Kathleen Kennedy. So we thought, hey, maybe
Right.
she's going to take a little bit of a break from micromanaging, and she's going to appoint somebody else that can maybe concentrate more on the creative direction while she's actually trying to run the studio. Because I think that the reason why Star Wars has suffered in the ways that it has, even though it's made a lot of money, there's a lot of people. I just had somebody write me today where they saw the title of our show and they're like, "Ooh, I'm going to have to follow this," and they're like, "You know what? I kind of lost faith in Disney Star Wars." And I think a lot of
Sure.
fans feel that way. And that's what I think
Mm-hmm.
is so exciting about this whole new direction here, is the fact that they finally put somebody who really understands the heart and soul of Star Wars in a position that's beyond just producing a show. But what happened to this other creative director? In fact, after she was appointed, you never even heard anything from her.
Yeah. I mean, I think, but I think it's wise, honestly, though. And for once, I think this is a good move um, for Disney slash Lucasfilm by not giving us that information, for the simple fact of, we've heard in times past that every time, like, okay, there's a new director, we got a director, this is our person, and then you find out, oh, 6 months later or a year later, oh no, we decided to scrap this person and bring this person in, or they started this movie, we're gonna stop production, and I think I think they've learned their lesson in the sense of, you know let's just kind of do things, in the words of Han Solo, real quiet, like, and just kind of actually do things behind the scenes, figure out what's working, what's not. If it's not working, okay, then let's quietly make that transition. So Filoni could have been in this position for a while. It's just now that he's kind of made more so now. It's now coming out that he's this, is executive creative director. But I think that it's smart to put him in. I mean, like, this guy is killing it for you, and like I said, he's the heir apparent to George Lucas. I mean, I don't understand what took them so long to do this at this point, but whatever the case may be, it is what it is. He's here. And the person who was in it, I know who you're talking about. However, I think when you, like I said, when you're looking at the whole brand of Star Wars, you really have to take in its totality of the characters, the story, the branding, the canon, the continuity, like all of this stuff, and it's massive. I mean, it's truly massive. But the way that Filoni has been able to masterfully put things into certain shows, like we've seen in Clone Wars, Rebels. Now we're seeing in Bad Batch. You know, we're seeing things happen, like I said, with the whole Luke thing at the end of season 2 of Mandalorian. You know, so it's just like it's refreshing, and I think that's what's, like you said, someone lost their faith in Disney Star Wars, and I think Filoni is the one who's going to have to be. He has to be the guy to bring it back. You know, and it's, you kind of have to have someone who's much like the creator, and who's better than Filoni at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Let's get this one comment from Ronaldo in. He says, Eric, I remember what you're saying. I don't remember the woman's name, but I do remember that she was basically the Kevin Feige for Star Wars. And exactly. You know, they made this big deal about bringing this person in, and, you know, it seems like she disappeared. You know, Ronaldo went on to say, I also remember that she had no previous work experience in this position, which was not good news. And I think that explains why we really weren't all that excited about it. You know, like, because on one hand,
Right.
like I said, a lot of fans were kind of like, okay, they're moving in the right direction. They have somebody in place that now can just focus solely on maybe working with the story group or whatever with Star Wars. And, you know, I mean, they can move on from there. But what I found to be comical was then you never heard anything from this woman at all. And it's true. She was billed to be almost like the Kevin Feige of the Star Wars world. And it seemed like it was business as usual, except what I find interesting about the situation we're in now is that Lucasfilm seems to have split in two camps. On one hand, you have the Filoni Favreau side of it, and on the other hand, you have the Kathleen Kennedy side of it. And what fascinates me, particularly as it relates to this little promotion or move or whatever you want to call it, it seems like Filoni is gaining ground within Lucasfilm. You know, you're hearing a little bit less about what Kathleen Kennedy's doing, and of course, there's, you know, constant rumors about, oh, she's on her way out and all that. And I don't really pay attention to that. I mean, it could be true, but I'm not really paying attention to that right now because other than her contract ending this year, there's really no other signs that anything else is going on. And in fact, you could even make the argument that things are too quiet over there.
Well, let me ask you this question. Do you think it's necessary for us as the public to know who the Kevin Feige person is? You know, I mean, we know Kathleen Kennedy is like the head of Lucasfilm. That much we know. But honestly, you know, what about just focusing on like the directors, like your Deborah Chow's, your Favreau's, your Filoni's, and those capacities? Like, I think more people care about who's directing more so than the creative director. I think the only reason why we care about it now is because Star Wars has kind of taken the major hit. And so I think that's why now everybody wants to know, okay, well, who's running the ship over there? But honestly, like beforehand, like the only people who cared about was George Lucas, you know, and that was it. Even though there was other people directing the movies, we just knew he wrote the stories. But like, you know, we had Irvin Kershner for, you know, Empire Strikes Back, you know, even in Solo, you know, you had Ron
Howard.
Ron Howard.
I mean, it was Lord Miller at first, but yeah, then
Lord Miller at first, but then Ron Howard, you know, Gareth Edwards, you know, he did Rogue One. So, I mean, like, you know, we cared more so about, you know, those particular people. We weren't trying to figure out, well, who's the creative director? So now, like, why does it matter? You see what I'm saying? Like,
right, yeah, like we're getting into the, you know, but wait a minute, though. I heard the accountant
like,
was going to be this
I was just about to say that.
You know, like,
I was just about to say that one. It's like, all right, well, who did the books on this? Like,
well,
it's just.
I know. Well, first of all, Ronaldo says her name was Michelle Rejwan. That's right. And I actually remember like the Michelle part. That was, but again, and I think you do bring up a really good point because, you know, we're getting into the minutia like, well, wait, who did the catering? I mean,
Right,
but at the
exactly.
same time, though, you have to look at it from this standpoint, though, is that it's the studio head that's inserting herself everywhere. I don't think people would necessarily care
Hmm.
so much if she wasn't firing directors like halfway into the movies or,
Hmm.
making these decisions that are not only against what the fans want, but probably against what Lucas himself would have wanted. And
Well,
she's
okay.
no, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask. So, do you think that okay? So now that we have Filoni in this executive creative director position, now I'm kind of wondering about this for a little bit. Do you think that even though Favreau is originally like a Marvel guy, and even though he did do the Disney Lion King, like the live action version of that, do you think that now Favreau is going to be kind of a little bit more like solidified or more rooted in Star Wars now? Or do you think he's still going to bounce around? Or do you think he's kind of like, you know what, I'm going to kind of right this ship with Filoni because I think he might feel like this is a real gold mine for him that he could really truly shine. Because maybe he feels like Feige has Marvel. Like, all right, go ahead and do Marvel. You've been doing fine. Marvel doesn't need me, but Star Wars does. Do you think that's going to be the case?
Well, I mean, I think it's kind of a multi-headed problem because on one hand, Favreau started out where he acted in a lot of movies too.
Yeah, he was even
And
in the Marvel movies. I mean,
sure. And then he started directing
yep.
some, right? I mean, he kind of he kicked off the whole Marvel universe with Iron Man. So
Yep.
it is interesting because these people are also fans, and it's kind of like, okay, we're basically representing what the fans want, and being fans themselves, it would be hard for somebody like Favreau, I would think, to let go of the whole Star Wars thing, particularly when he's really successful at it. On the other hand, I do think that he wants to do other things, though. And it's kind of the same thing with Feige. Remember, Feige was actually going to make a Star Wars film. Now, I don't know if that's still the case or, if that's going to happen or not, but he actually was interviewed not too long ago, and he talked about the fact that, he's going to stay with Marvel. I mean, he loves Star Wars and everything, but he doesn't want to be the studio head of Lucasfilm. So he kind of turned down the job, I guess. And I don't know if he was strictly just addressing the rumors that have been out there that the fans have pretty much run with, or if he's actually indirectly responding to some internal communications within Lucasfilm. And I think the problem is that ever since George Lucas left, it's been kind of pandemonium over there. You have this studio head that still kind of wants to be a producer and second guessing all these decisions. I mean, it'd be one thing if it happened once, but virtually every single Star Wars film that's been released, she has questioned the director or fired them or, maybe brought in somebody, like in the case of Gareth Edwards, brought in somebody else to do certain things. And it's almost like, things are going all over the place with it. And that, I think, is why fans are really concentrating on, well, who is this? Because, it's almost like when you're flying in an airplane, you don't care who the pilot is until the plane starts doing some weird stuff. Then all of a sudden, you're Googling their bio and, trying to find out their background, right? I mean, and I think that that's basically what's happening here is the fact that, no, none of us really cared about who was, making all these decisions at Lucasfilm until they started screwing up the franchise. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, wait a minute.
I want everybody's name and number.
Right, exactly. Because I think you had the infrastructure in place that was okay, right? You had the story group, and then you had Kathleen Kennedy as a head, but somewhere along the lines, they're all acting mostly on their own accord, it seems like. It doesn't. And then on top of that, you have Kathleen Kennedy now, who basically is trying to push an agenda, at least that's the way it seems, more than she's interested in good storytelling. And naturally, Favreau and Filoni are the saviors of this thing because, number one, let's go back, right? Like you said, Filoni started out under George Lucas directly. He was kind of like the protege.
Right.
He was the guy that Lucas was like, all right, I'm going to take you under my wing. I'm going to be, like the Yoda or Obi-Wan to your Luke, basically. And of course, you basically had Filoni creating the character of Ahsoka, who of course first annoyed everybody, but since has become beloved. And he eventually, it started out where Lucas was more like the Clone Wars guy and Filoni was under him and, he wrote some stories or whatever. But then it kind of switched over and now Filoni actually finished out the Clone Wars. Then he creates Rebels. Then he went back and finished the Clone Wars again, but for real this time.
Again. Right.
Then he actually goes and does The Mandalorian and then does The Bad Batch. So, and all of these, by the way, have been praised by fans and critics too. So you have somebody who has a real pedigree with the fans and for the actual material. And so, I don't know. I can't help but think that, things are in better hands. Let's get to some of Ronaldo's comments here. They're piling up. So he says, first, this sounds like very good news to me, but I'm a bit skeptical about this. And he says, the reason, did you see the news that the president of Disney will remove the creatives who direct? In which direction will the projects go? Yeah, and he says, and instead they will be replaced with people who work in the financial area. That is, people who have no idea of script writing or storytelling. Well, this actually brings up another good point, though. And this was another piece of the puzzle that we hadn't yet been able to get to, and that is that in all this, you have your Kathleen Kennedy, your Filoni, Favreau, but then you also had the Disney president. At the time, it was Bob Iger. Now it's, I forgot his name. But it doesn't even matter because, these guys end up being interchangeable, right? So you have various Disney officials. First, you'll have the president, then you'll have, maybe he's the vice president of something or whatever. But the point is, you basically have the creative team at Lucasfilm, the studio heads at Lucasfilm, and then the heads of Disney. And they all seem to have these different viewpoints of where Star Wars should go. Now, the cool thing is the creative team has basically taken it upon themselves to just do their thing. You had all the authors get together and, they ended up coming up with the whole High Republic thing, which, don't get me wrong. I know all this stuff is being directed by Kathleen Kennedy herself probably, but they sort of let them kind of do their thing, right? They haven't interfered too much. There are things that I know that she was not happy about when it came to The Mandalorian. And then, of course, there was the infamous thing where Lucasfilm and I think even Disney wanted to get rid of Gina Carano far earlier than when she actually was fired. It was Favreau himself that initially blocked it. And that showed that he actually had the clout now that he could say, you know what? No, head of the company I work for. You can't get rid of this person. And it worked for a while. And then, of course, they fire her. And now there's even rumors that she's coming back now. So, it's a mess.
Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. I think, and I don't know, because I remember when George Lucas left, he named Kathleen as like the head of, and because she studied, she kind of sat at his feet on a different side of things. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
Filoni was more on the creative side. She's more on the business side of things. But I think what went lacking is, when you had George Lucas at the helm, we've said before, everything kind of flowed through George. The stories and the business flowed through George, and he kind of had people on either side, his left and right hand, pretty much, to like, okay, Kathleen, you go over here, Dave, you go over here, and then I'm kind of like You know, he's like the father. You know what I'm saying? Like you got the father and you got the daughter, and hey, I didn't even think about
Yeah, I
that.
know. It's
That's
like the
kind of
Force triad or whatever
yeah,
from the.
yeah, exactly. That just dawned on me like
Well,
this
and you
very
know
second.
what? In a lot of ways, that does kind of keep it at bay, right? Because then the son and the daughter could almost symbolize like the creative versus the business, and he's kind of like the guy
Right,
keeping that
right.
balance.
Balance, exactly, and that's where I was going with it. But once you remove the father, now they're kind of on, and it seemed like Filoni and Kathleen, they dealt with each other, but they didn't. They really weren't together, if that makes sense. Like they didn't come up with a unified. And I think now this is what's going to happen. Now with you have him having the seat at the table, he's always had a seat at the table, but I think he has more influence now. He's the creative director, and now that he can say, okay, you know what, this is where we're going with it. Kathleen, can we finance this? Can we do this? And I think that's is what's going to hopefully make even more Star Wars. And he has he has the pedigree now, like you said, which is a great word. He has a pedigree now to really truly say it, because it's like, look, all right, yeah, you did a bunch of films, and you know, okay, Star Wars still grossed a bunch of money, even though some of them kind of tanked in people's minds. But the box office, they were still successful.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm winning with the fans.
Well,
And
and
so,
here's continuing
you know what I
your
mean?
analogy though. So you had like the son and the daughter represent the creative and the business, right? And then Lucas was the father,
Right.
keeping the balance. What makes this analogy even more interesting is what's happened now is you've replaced that father with a new father who is the head of Disney, who now
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like he has yet a third agenda, right? It's like the
Mm-hmm.
profit investors and stuff like that. So now you don't it's almost like a further dividing force in a way, to the point where you have like this multi-headed thing and everything's going in different directions. And
Yep.
so I think what's happening too is the fact that they're putting profits, they're putting things like that sometimes ahead of the actual creative, where George didn't care. He actually had all this money. He was basically the most successful and biggest independent filmmaker. All he cared about was telling the story he wanted to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's honestly because without any story, there is no Star Wars, period.
Right.
That's the
Right.
reason why we all fell in love. Like, you fell in love with it in 1977. I fell in love with it in like the early 90s, late 80s. So it still revolved around the story. The same thing that got your attention as what, a 7 or 8 year old kid in 1977. It's the same thing that got me interested and made me want to go into production. It was the story. It was like the story, then the visuals, how everything is told. And when you and I both watched that thing on Disney Plus, when I think the
Oh, the
gallery or
gallery?
the galley,
Yeah.
yeah, where like, you know, they're all sitting around and hearing Filoni talk. Like you and I talk about this all the time. Like listening to this man just really just break down Star Wars and explain what it really truly is. It's not about TIE fighters, it's not about lightsabers, it's not about, you know, all the cool effects. Those are all like the ornaments that make Star Wars look pretty. But the Christmas tree, the actual tree, is the story. And if you have no story, you have no Star Wars. You have no Star Wars, you have no money, because the fans aren't going to support it. And the more you keep, you know, disappointing the fans, like your friend said, they're going to walk away. And now Disney's invested all this money into buying a franchise that could take them honestly light years, you know, beyond. You're gonna lose it.
Well, that's what I'm hoping that they're going to do now. I mean, I hope with Filoni's promotion or change in title or whatever it is, I hope that this is a sign, a continuing sign, I should say, that they're trying to right this ship. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that it's kind of like, okay, let's make smart decisions now and unify. Because it's not, you can have the story, but if you have a bunch of people that don't know what to do with it, that's not going to do you any good. Everybody has to have a vision that's aligned, and they need to plan this thing again. We're going to go back to that again. You have to plan it, and you have to almost like what they did with the
Execute.
MCU, you know? And I mean, I'm not even just talking about like in universe where you had phase 1, 2, and 3 and all that stuff, but also a
Mm-hmm.
plan for the films. You know, we want to do this in phase 1. These are the stories that we need to tell, and we want to get from here to here and then go into the next thing. Let me get some of these comments here. Ronaldo says, in this sense, for example, Kevin Feige will not be the one who decides where the MCU will go, but the one who will decide will be someone involved in finance. The same with Pixar and Lucasfilm. Yeah, I know that they're trying to make these. They're doing the same thing that record companies did, and I'll get to that in a second. He says, so I think it's great that Dave gets promoted, but if he's going to have to obey someone who only understands finances and not product quality, I don't know how much creative control he's going to have.
No, that's a valid point.
It is, except for the fact, do not discount the fact that the word executive is in his title.
Right.
Okay? He is the executive creative director. And I can tell you that means he actually has ultimate authority. There probably is nobody above him in that. Otherwise, he would just be promoted to creative director, and then there would be somebody above him. Don't get me wrong, he probably has to answer to somebody, most likely to Kathleen herself. But the fact that executive is in his title actually means something. That's why people are getting excited.
Yeah, no, you make a very, very valid point. And that you're absolutely right. It does. I mean, because when you're an executive, no different when you're executive producer, executive director, it's like the buck stops with you in this particular area. So, and you're ultimately responsible. And so I think that, that's what's honestly been needed so much, in Star Wars is the creative control, because we've always said, Star Wars always flowed out of George Lucas. It was kind of like whatever he was thinking. But, we've often, talked about there's some things that George Lucas was kind of like, all right, that was kind of bonehead, or that was kind of stupid. This doesn't make sense. I mean, I get it. It's your baby. You can do what you want to do with it. But I mean, now that you've established this world, now that we all kind of, have picked apart, now we understand it almost as much as he does.
Well, and it's also,
so now
it comes down to the fact that, you had to do the impossible. I mean, how do you replace a guy who created this thing? It was not like he was just running Lucasfilm. I mean, he actually created the thing. It'd be one thing if he had hired some brilliant young guy who actually created Star Wars and he was running it and then he hands it off. It's kind of like you said, he was everything. He was the studio head. He was the executive producer. He was the creator, the writer. In some cases, the director in like 4 out of the 6 movies that he did. So he wore all these hats, which means that you have to replace him with multiple people. And then once you get more than one person, now you're going to get some conflict because everybody's going to have a different idea about how something should be approached or whatever the case may be. And I think that that's just where it's at. Now, here's what I'm hoping. Because, again, I mean, this show's probably not, we'll see where the chats go, but, this show wasn't really designed to be like some 2-hour show or something. I mean, but at the same time, though, I think that it's very important to deal with this because this is going to affect about everything that we're going to be talking about from now on, because one of the big questions is, where are they going to go from here? They got The Mandalorian Season 3 coming up. They got the Book of Boba Fett coming up. They have a couple of movies in the books. Star Wars is at a really weird time.
Yeah, especially that Rogue Squadron movie. Like, we haven't heard much about that. We know there's been work being done on it, but we haven't heard anything really much about it. It's been kind of quiet. Now we're hearing more about Obi-Wan. We can't forget about Andor.
Sure.
You got the High Republic.
Pictures from that. Yep, High Republic.
Yeah, and we can. So now, not only is, and that's kind of like one of the things too that we're not used to in Star Wars, where this is I believe it's probably like the first time we, at least in live action form, that we're all over the place, because you got things in all different types of timelines right now. That's all coming out of one franchise. Right, and that's what I'm saying. So you have like you got like before it was just the saga films, and so you always knew like okay, there's usually 3 movies in that. But now we're getting like okay, we got all these TV shows that are popping up in different, and even in the TV shows, it's not like a uniform like direction. It's kind of like we're post Return of the Jedi, and now we're in between this between episodes whatever and whatever, and then this happens like 200 years before that, and then this is here, and oh, this was on the other side of the galaxy while this was going, like, so now you're all, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's cool, but I mean, like, it's still kind of like, I think that's the other thing too, where a lot of people are kind of trying to figure this thing out, is because it's the first time Star Wars has not been in a linear kind of fashion where
Yep.
the original trilogy, you had, okay, 4, 5, and 6 is a continuation of Luke Skywalker's, that hero's journey. Okay, now we're going to take you back to how Darth Vader became Darth Vader. All right, that's once again another linear sequence. All right, now we're going to go sequel, another linear sequence. But then once you start popping in Solo, Rogue One, now we're dropping things in between stuff, and then now you got the Clone Wars cartoon, and then we're going to Rebels. This happens a little bit before here, and then now we're on Mandalorian as post Return of the Jedi, and then it's all over the place. I think that's kind of
right, but I mean, I think where your point's the strongest, because even with the animated shows, people distinguish between animation and film, because that's really all you had. But
True.
the problem is that once you went to actual live action TV, now things are getting a little bit crazy, because now it's not distinguishable like it used to be. Ronaldo basically says, can you imagine if Rian Johnson directed the episode where Cara Dune returns? Well, we'll see, right? He also says, as long as
people.
right, as long as Dave has complete control over the creative side, we can rest easy. And I would agree with that.
Yeah.
He also says, did you hear the news of Rangers of the New Republic? Now, I have to say that the way that he worded that, it sounded like it's not asking us if we've heard any news. Sounds like there's something out there. I haven't heard anything. Do you know what he's talking about?
There was something about it. I didn't get a chance to catch it. I remember seeing it. I meant to come back to it, but life got away from me. But
sure.
But I remember something was kind of. I think they were talking about how they were actually going to address, or there was like some new person that was going to take the Cara Dune kind of character or something like that. Maybe Harrison Dula, I think, was going to play a bigger role in that. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm sure Ronaldo will enlighten us.
I will say that Ronaldo, let us know what you're talking about. If they went that route, I think that would be the most intelligent thing to do. If you're going to replace Cara Dune, which, I mean, hey, for all we know, game could be back on if they bring Gina Carano back. But let's just say they don't. The Harrison Dula thing would actually make the most sense, because they've already established that she's around in that timeline at the end of Rebels, and she's the other piece. Oh, this is interesting. He's saying Rangers of the New Republic is no longer in development.
Oh, wow.
Well, I mean, I could say this. I didn't hear that, but at the same time, I've heard like nothing on that series.
Yeah, but and you know what? Do you think that could? I wonder if that's a Filoni move. Now that he's creative director, because we don't know how long he's kind of been in that spot,
right?
I mean, because if you're not going to have Cara Dune, and maybe if she was like the focal point, it's like might as well scrap it, because you don't want to put something out there just because we said we're going to do it and it ends up being crappy. So once again, it's that quality control. Almost like Filoni is going to become like the new Steve Jobs, man. This is like when it comes to Star Wars. That's what I feel.
Well, he basically, this is where it gets kind of weird. He says, now the news doesn't say that it was canceled, just that they're not working on it. But my whole thing is, if they're not working on it, well, I mean, I guess I can see that, right? But here's the thing that is kind of strange when you really stop and think about all this. Think back to when all these series were announced. It was weird to me that they announced so many different series, because even in my head, I'm like, okay, you got, New Mandalorian, you have Andor, you have Obi-Wan, you have the Acolyte, you've got, Lando, right? Remember
Yep.
that one? You have
Mm-hmm.
Rangers of the New Republic. You have like all this stuff. And then on top of
Ahsoka.
that, Ahsoka, right? And then on top of
Mm-hmm.
that, you had the Book of Boba Fett. Then you got to put out this Rogue Squadron film. It just seemed
Yeah,
like,
Obi-Wan and Andor. Yeah, man, it's just a
I mean, it
lot.
just seems like, yeah, like, I mean, almost something is certain to go wrong. I mean, are these actually actively in development, or are these things you're talking about? But I mean, they got logos for it. I mean, it just seemed like they were kind of far along. Maybe not necessarily
Mm-hmm.
cast, but certainly working up scripts, pre-production, and all that stuff. So you hear nothing about any of those. I mean, the Acolyte pops up every once in a while,
Yep.
but you don't really hear anything else. I mean, Lando.
Yeah, I
Why?
heard. And
Why
that's the one.
announce it? And that's what
Well,
I'm saying.
I just wondered. Maybe it's just the time. Like I said, I mean, I think they have their things in the forefront right now, and maybe that's the ones they're just trying to push, and that makes sense. Like, okay,
Well, it
Obi-Wan is
does.
something everybody's been.
Sure.
Obi-Wan is something everybody's wanted. Andor, they've already been talking about for the longest. Ahsoka is definitely one that, of course, everybody wants to know because, once again, you still have to answer that age-old question for those of, who watched Rebels. How did you survive? The last we saw her, the Sith temple was closing. Vader walked out. We never saw Ahsoka come out, so everybody assumed she was dead, and then now she's popping up in Mandalorian. So it's like, okay, well, you got to kind of explain that now. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
I mean,
So
here's the thing, though. Well, let me get to this one comment from Ronaldo first. There's speculation that the series was supposedly going to focus on Cara Dune, and since they are not going to recast the character, they decided to stop development. Yeah, that's
right.
basically what we were saying. But here's the thing. I think that what they're doing is they're taking stuff that's either happening around the time periods we already know. Like Obi-Wan and Andor, you could say, okay, that stuff's happening kind of in the past, right? That's in between some episodes. As far as some of the other series, they're taking everything that is pretty much happening around The Mandalorian. Because remember, we said The Mandalorian was essentially like an anchor show. And they were going to
Right.
spin things off of that, right? So maybe that's what they're doing. But it just seems like it's a really weird move because you have all these other things that are popping up. Like, there's been a ton of rumors now that Brie Larson's going to come aboard as Mara Jade.
Captain
Now,
Marvel, huh?
they have been talking to her about appearing in Star Wars. Same thing with Gal Gadot. They've been talking to her about it. She's supposed to play some Sith princess or something. Now, that I can see in The Acolyte, maybe. But
Ooh,
again,
that'd be nice.
it's kind of one of those things where you're sitting there like trying to figure out, because a lot of these rumors, you immediately want to dismiss them as overblown fan fiction, but the problem is they're coming from reputable sources and they keep popping up. And they are rooted in some truth, and maybe that's one of the reasons why it's easier to believe them. I mean, we'll see, right? But the point is, you're still getting that sense that it's all over the place. Now, it used to be easier because all you had to do was go to George himself and he'd just be like, no, that's not true, and then move on. But in a lot of ways, it almost seems like people at Lucasfilm don't even know what each other is doing. And that's what I'm hoping that Filoni's
Right.
new position solves. It's like, look,
Correct.
he is the creative director. He's going to oversee this. He's going to bring in some continuity, communication,
Order and security
Order-
for
yes, for their new republic. It's just one of those things that I can't help but think that this is a good move. I mean, obviously.
And I think, when you have people, like I said, I think now they've kind of got a stable of directors now that they trust, like, because of The Mandalorian now with Deborah Chow and because we're still waiting on Taika Waititi film. He's got something that's supposed to work.
I totally
Ryan
forgot
Johnson,
about that too. Oh,
Ryan Johnson's got something. So he's got a whole trilogy apparently. So and I'm just wondering, like, and to this point, like Ronaldo said, if they cancel Rangers, are they gonna cancel a lot of other stuff now that he's the creative director? Is he going to be like, yeah, this is stupid, let's not do that? You know what I'm saying? Like, is there more coming? No,
just show me everything that has Kathleen's name on it, and we'll just kind of X that out. Yeah, SJW, female empowered stuff. Yeah, we're not doing that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's a good question.
Yeah.
But Ronaldo's got a good one. He says, I could see Brie Larson as Evar Chris. That is. Every single time I see her in the comic, I keep thinking about her. That's what's so funny. Totally.
That's a good one.
It is. But I could see her as Mara Jade too, though. You like dye her hair red. I can see that. That's actually one bit of casting that I wouldn't mind. I know there's a lot of, I've been a big fan of her since Community. So I don't have that weird hatred that a lot of people for some odd reason have against her. But as soon as it was announced that, okay, she might play her, because there's like only a handful of people. And I remember we actually did a show on this once where we were trying to cast, who could play some of these other characters. I wish I could think of the.
Talk about like Thrawn, like we were trying to do, like who would play Thrawn, who would play. We did do a Mary Jade one.
I know we did, and I can't remember. I don't know.
Well, of course, everybody says Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah, but I remember we said no because that's too obvious.
Obvious, right? That's too, but we had as far as Mary Jade is concerned, I think Brie Larson did come up.
She probably did. And
I think it was one more other person that we said that wouldn't be bad. But like I said, I just really just hope that once again this is like the second part of cleaning house for Lucasfilm. You know what I mean? Like I think this is like the next phase, if you will, of house cleaning over at Lucasfilm, is really trying to, you kind of got canon kind of for the most part, pretty solidified. You got the High Republic that's still doing well, but now I think, you start need to deal with like the creative stuff and making sure things make sense and have, like you said, have that continuity, make sure you're not stepping on things. And who better than Filoni to really bring that?
Yeah, I think Ronaldo senses that we're starting to get to the end because he says, can I add something quick? Can you imagine? Yeah, since when can you not add something, right? These are basically free-for-all discussions with a title that's...
You're Ronaldo.
Right, exactly.
Let's just call it what it is. You're Ronaldo.
Fan number one, right? Can you imagine Peter Cullen voicing Darth Vader? It's hard for me to imagine. Okay, so let me put it like this. So, obviously, James Earl Jones is the voice of Darth Vader. And It's hard to get that out of your system. But I will say this. Why not? Because, as you guys know, I play a lot of the Star Wars video games, have ever since the 90s. And, they've had various actors do the voice of Vader. And some have been better than others. But there have been a couple that have been spot on. Like, I don't remember what game it was. It might have been like Shadows of the Empire for Super Nintendo or something. Or it was maybe Force Unleashed. It was one of those games. It was something that was not super recent. Excuse me. But fairly recent, I guess. And I remember thinking, like, man, when we lose James Earl Jones, that's the guy they need to get to voice Vader. As long as they don't like pitch down Hayden Christensen or something.
Oh my God! Yeah, just to make it. Yeah, just to say, well, he's in the suit and he did the voice. Yeah, no.
And then the special editions, like they'd go back to like the original trilogy and like put Hayden Christensen in there.
Oh my goodness!
But because he's like Optimus Prime, right? Oh yeah, and look, I'm saying it, and then let me get this in there. Man. Yeah, he has an amazing voice for Vader, and he would be cool.
I could
So
see
what, Josh
Terrence
Brolin?
Carson did.
You know what I'm talking about, right? He's the guy
TC
that did
Carson would be
Thanos.
good too.
Who? We're like talking at each other now.
All right. Yeah. The guy who did Thanos, I don't know if he has it deep enough. But I mean, I guess because that's the hard part because we're basing the voice off of James Earl Jones. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, but I would say like TC Carson would be cool.
And he did what?
He played Kyle Barker on the show Living Single, but he's the guy with the dreads. He also was in Candyman, but he also had that real I'm a Kyle Barker. Like he has
there you
that
go.
dark.
Get Tony Todd.
Tony Todd, yep.
Tony Todd would be okay. Yep. It'd be a little different,
yep.
but I mean, the cool thing is because you have James Earl Jones, and he's so iconic with that voice. There's so many guys that can imitate that now at this point. Because, like I said, there have been a couple in the games that have just been like, I mean, you're just like, dude, that's spot on.
Yeah, exactly. Even when they and it's crazy because like when you hear him in what is it, Rebels? It's the way they make Vader sound. He sounds younger. Like it's still deep but younger, if that makes sense. Versus like Empire Strikes Back to me is still like the, that's the best Vader.
That's when he was the most menacing.
Yeah, like when he's Empire, yeah. The whole suit changed a little bit too. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, because that's the problem, when they're doing these in the order that they do it, right? Because then when you watch Rogue One, he kind of sounds like old man Vader in a way. And it's like, but he did do it in Rebels, right?
Disaster. That's because he is an old man doing it.
That's what I'm saying. He's like in his 80s, right. And I mean that's the downside of doing that. And then you flash forward what in universe is like a week later, and it's like he sounds like 40 years younger or whatever.
Yep.
I guess he got that new voice box.
Well, that's all the way they go. Just fix that, and he's always tweaking with the suit, and
right. I mean,
changes.
The beautiful thing about Star Wars is it's very modular. It's very easy to come up with in-universe explanations for things. Right. That part's true because remember, he's like, the suit was kind of new. He was making some improvements on it, and but I mean, the truth is that James Earl Jones is like 300 years old, and I mean, it's like. I mean, he might even be 90 by now.
I think he just celebrated his 89th.
Did he?
He's almost 90.
Yeah, he's getting up there, man. All I know is
he's 88 or 89.
They better just have that guy like say every word that or get like AI to do it.
Well, it was crazy because he reprised his role in the new Coming to America movie,
right?
And in the new Coming to America movie, he's like planning his own funeral, and that's like. Man, I don't even want to think about it, but it's just like,
man,
I was just like, no, don't play like that.
I thought the exact same thing. Like, can you imagine him though? Because he's probably thinking like, dude, I'm probably a couple of years away from this. It would be weird. Like, I mean, it's one thing when you're an actor and you're like 30 years old and you're pretending to die or whatever, but you're almost 90 and you're kind of dealing with your funeral, and then you're kind of, then you watch the thing back. And you actually see like yourself in a casket or whatever. It's like, really, dude?
Like, it's kind of
hitting a little close to home, I think.
I always made the joke that would be worse is like, he played it and he actually did die, like while he was playing dead. Like, all right,
right? I know.
And he never woke up. Like he was just like, all right, James, come on, let's do it again. And he's like gone. Like that would just be crazy.
The director would be like, all right, well, I think we got it. We'll just fix it in post. Right. Ronaldo says he's 90 years old. He looks great for that age. Yeah, I mean, and it's amazing too because people have been looking better. Like I noticed that if you go back and watch older movies, right, when these people are like 19, 20 years old, but they look like they're 40. It's like as time has gone on, people just sort of look younger,
Yeah.
So, I
Or
mean,
it seems like the age process just stopped for them. It's not like the fact that they look younger. It's just like they never age past a certain point. Like,
yeah. And that's definitely, I would say, the case with him. There's like a little bit of signs of aging or whatever, but he essentially looks the same. I think that's a lot of it too, because you see all these people too. That, I mean, it kills me where they'll show you, like, say they're like in their 40s, 50s, 60s or whatever. They show you pictures of when they were younger, and they look like nothing like themselves. Like, you would think that you would be depressed because you're like, man, I once looked like this, and look at me now, right? Whereas a lot of other people, you just kind of look like an older version of your younger self. That's a little bit
right.
But you still look like you. Like, people would recognize you. If you showed them a picture of when you were 18 or something, they would know it was you,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
But you know what? I just hope that this whole, just this whole direction that they're doing is going to be more positive, and this promotion or lateral movement or whatever this thing actually is, where Filoni is now the executive creative director. I just hope that what that means is that we're starting to see, like you said, a little bit of cleaning house, a little bit of, hey, let's do this right. It's too bad they didn't do this back in 2012, but hey, I mean, better late than never, right?
Yes, exactly.
Now, I mean, before I move on, I got to ask, do we have clear your mind questions today?
Do we have clear your mind questions today? No, we do not, sir.
All right. So, see, I got to know these things. I got to know. All right, well, basically then, I am going to leave this in your guys' capable hands. I want you to tell me in the comments section, what do you guys think of this move from Dave Filoni? Do you think that this is a good thing? Do you think it's more of a ceremonial title and he's just going to pretty much do what he's always done? Or do you actually think that this is a positive change? That this means that the Star Wars franchise is definitely moving in the right direction, that they're going to start buttoning up and nailing down all the little idiosyncrasies and plot holes and, canon issues that they have with the Star Wars franchise, and that we're actually going to finally achieve our dream of a united fan base and pretty much good quality stories moving forward that all make sense. Let us know in the comments section. As far as Monday goes, we'll see what happens. There may be a show. If we have it, it might be a little bit later. Work schedules. But the plan is that we're going to review what are we at now? The 4th episode of The Bad Batch, right? Yeah. Did you see it yet? Mm-hmm. Okay, I haven't. Was it good? I mean, not to like do it, but no, just
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, you haven't seen it yet. All right.
No.
Okay, so neither one of us have seen it. Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. But that's what we're going to do if we don't do it Monday. If for some reason we don't end up doing the show on Monday, then we'll do the Bad Batch review for Friday's show. Unless, of course, we find out that Favreau is like the new head of Lucasfilm now or something stupid like that, right? I mean, the way things are going, who knows? Unfortunately, Boatwright Family and Comics joined us tonight. But, hey, next time, we'll probably have a longer show because we'll have even more. Actually, this show's lasted an hour, which is more than I thought we were going to get out of this topic. But, it's us. So, again, thank you guys for watching. Hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed to our channel. No matter what, though, hit that like button because that definitely helps the channel. You can reach us at Head to Head SW on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Keep communicating with us there. If you guys have topic ideas, something you'd like to see us cover, let us know, and we'll definitely consider it because there's no shortage of Star Wars topics to talk about. So with that, we'll see you guys Monday at, well, we'll see. This is going to be a little bit of an interesting week, so bear with us. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.